Hello, my name is Carrie Brown and I'm with the Central Mississippi Regional Library System. Today, I'm going to be reading to you chapters 1 and 2 of A to Z Mysteries, The Missing Mummy, written by Ron Roy, illustrated by John Stephen Gurney, published by Random House, New York. Chapter 1. Mummy Monday at the museum? Josh said. He peered over Dink's shoulder at the Sunday newspaper. So what's the next day? Tummy Tuesday? It was summer vacation, and Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose were lying on the lawn behind Dink's house. Josh's dog Pal was snoozing under a tree. Ruth Rose took the paper and read the article quickly. No, Josh, the next day is about dinosaurs, she said. It's called Tyrannosaurus Tuesday. The museum is having programs for kids all week, Dink explained. So what happens on Wednesday? Josh asked. Kids go to the Connecticut River and study plant and animal life, Ruth Rose said. It's called Wet Wednesday. Dink took the newspaper back from Ruth Rose, and the next day you get to make a horror movie. That's Thrilling Thursday. The last day is Frog Friday. Each kid gets to study a frog. So let's sign up, Josh said. How much does it cost? Dink scanned the page. $1 for each program, he said. He looked at Josh and Ruth Rose. That's $5 for all 5 days. I don't have $5, Ruth Rose said. Me neither, said Josh, but I know how we can earn it. How? Dink asked. My dad's been trying to get the barn cleaned out, he said. I bet he'd give us the money if we did it for him. Great idea, Dink said. The kids ran to Josh's house and spent the rest of Sunday working. Brian and Bradley, Josh's 2 little brothers, helped by playing with Pal. Josh's dad gave each of the kids $7 for their hard work. After lunch the next day, Dink and Josh and Ruth Rose got on a bus to Hartford. 15 minutes later, the bus dropped them off on Main Street in front of the Wadsworth Museum. Across the street was a bank. A digital sign over the bank's entrance said Monday, July 10th, 82 degrees. Then the sign flashed the time. It was nearly 2 o'clock. Come on, guys, Dink said. We only have a few minutes to sign up. They ran up the museum's front steps and through the wide doors. Inside, the museum was air-conditioned and quiet. The floor was made of marble. Tapestries and large paintings covered the white walls. Welcome to Mummy Monday, said a woman standing behind a counter. Across the lobby, a bunch of other kids and a few grown-ups were already waiting. Ruth Rose took a map from a rack just inside the door. Then the kids walked over to join the group. They each gave the woman behind the counter $1. I wonder where they keep the mummies, Josh whispered. At exactly 2 o'clock, a door behind the counter opened and a tall man walked out. He was wearing a tan jacket and shorts, knee socks, lace boots, and a white helmet. I'm Dr. Harris Tweed, the man said. Today I will take you on a journey to ancient Egypt. Dr. Tweed's face, hands, and knees were deeply tanned. Dink wondered how much time he had spent in the Egyptian desert. Who's ready to follow me into a tomb? Dr. Tweed asked. He smiled, showing big white teeth that made his tanned face even darker. We're going in a tomb? Josh muttered. I think I want my $1 back. Shh, Dink whispered. Dr. Tweed's eyes narrowed. If you're afraid of mummies, now's the time to speak up. A girl with red hair said. Won't the mummy smell? Today you will learn precisely why mummies don't smell, said Dr. Tweed. Now, please, follow me to the tomb. They walked to an arch at the rear of the lobby. Through the arch was a room with rows of benches facing a blank stone wall. The wall was built of large, flat rocks fitted closely together. Dink wondered how the museum people got those huge rocks inside. The tomb, and the mummies, are on the other side of this wall, Dr. Tweed said. Before we go inside, I want to tell you a little about how these people died and how they became mummies. He pointed to the benches. Please be seated. Let's sit in front, Dink said, heading for a bench. When everyone was seated, Dr. Tweed began speaking in a deep voice. Close your eyes and imagine you are standing on the bank of the River Nile 4,000 years ago. Feel the sun on your back. See the river as it flows by. Hear the oxen bellow as they labor in the fields. A hush fell over the group. Suddenly, an earthquake shakes the ground, Dr. Tweed shouted. Dink's eyes popped open as goosebumps crept up his arm. All the kids opened their eyes and stared at Dr. Tweed. Later, he continued, the survivors prepare the dead for burial. 3 of the people who died in that earthquake are with us today. Dr. Tweed walked over to the wall and pressed his hand against one of the stones. Immediately the wall slid open. Through the opening, Dink could see a dim room. The stone floor was partly covered with sand and gravel. What you see is the burial tomb, Dr. Tweed said quietly. Come in, please, but only speak in whispers and touch nothing. This is so great, Ruth Rose whispered as they entered the tomb. The tomb was cold, and Dink shivered. Old pots and farming tools were scattered around the floor. Strange-looking symbols were painted on the walls. Off to one side were 3 stone coffins. Chapter 2. One of the coffins was lying on a stone table. The other 2 were leaning upright against the walls to either side. Dink noticed that the coffin on the table was smaller than the other 2. You are standing in an actual Egyptian tomb, Dr. Tweed said in a hushed voice. It was brought here in pieces and then reconstructed. He pointed at each of the coffins. An ancient Egyptian coffin is called a sarcophagus. Each sarcophagus holds a mummy. In a moment, I will open the lids, but first, take a moment to appreciate the fine artwork. On each lid, jewels and gold had been used to create a mask. The faces look peaceful, almost happy, thought Dink. The Egyptians believed that people who died would need their money in the next life, Dr. Tweed said, so rich people were often buried near their wealth. He pointed through an arch into another room. That is the treasure chamber, he said. You'll get a chance to look in there after we view the mummies. Ruth Rose raised her hand. How come one of the coffins is so small? She asked. Dr. Tweed walked over to the sarcophagus on the table. This sarcophagus contains a child mummy, he explained. The little boy died with his parents, who now stand beside him for eternity. Dr. Tweed placed his hand on a standing sarcophagus. This is the boy's mother, he said, using both hands. He swung open the lid. And the father. Dr. Tweed opened the other standing sarcophagus. Without saying another word, he removed the lid of the smallest sarcophagus and leaned it against the wall. The kids stared at the 3 mummies. Each was covered with some kind of cloth, yellowed with age. Dink realized that Dr. Tweed was right. There was no smell at all. Each mummy is wrapped in strips of linen, Dr. Tweed said. Beneath the cloth, suddenly a woman with long blonde hair who was wearing a baggy dress darted forward. She snatched the child and raced out of the tomb. Stop! Dr. Tweed shouted, bolting after the woman. Everyone in the room began talking at once. Before the kids could figure out what to do, Dr. Tweed hurried back in the tomb. Quiet, please, he said. It seems Mummy Monday will have to be postponed. We'll have it tomorrow. But tomorrow is Tyrannosaurus Tuesday, someone said. Dr. Tweed looked flustered. His tanned face had turned pale. One of his eyelids was twitching. Yes, of course you're right, he said. I'll schedule another Mummy Day for next week. Now you'll have to leave the tomb. I'm very sorry. Kids mumbled no fair as they filed out. Dr. Tweed stepped aside to let them pass. Why would anyone steal a mummy? Josh asked as he, Dink, and Ruth Rose followed the other kids. I read somewhere that gold and jewels were wrapped up with the bodies, Ruth Rose said. Maybe that mummy has valuable stuff inside the cloth. You mean that woman is going to unwrap the mummy? Josh asked. Gross. Dink, Josh, and Ruth Rose were the last kids out of the tomb. A moment later, Dr. Tweed hurried past. Behind them, the tomb door closed with a rumble. This is so bogus, Josh said. Should we just go home? I have to use the restroom first, Ruth Rose said. The kids found the restrooms around the corner from the tomb. The door to the ladies' room opened, and a smartly dressed woman with short, dark hair stepped out. She was carrying a briefcase and talking on a cell phone. We'll wait for you here, Dink said as Ruth Rose slipped into the restroom. Wonder what the thief did with the mummy, Josh said. I mean, she couldn't exactly carry it down Main Street. Suddenly, the restroom door crashed open. Ruth Rose stood there looking as if she'd seen a ghost. "Ruth Rose, what's the matter?" Dink said. "Get Dr. Tweed," she answered. "It's in the restroom." "What's in the restroom?" Josh asked. Ruth Rose took a deep breath. "The missing mummy," she said. Thank you. Be sure to tune in next week for chapters 3 and 4. Goodbye.